Hey guys, what's going on? It's Ben here. I'm back again today doing another video, and the subject of today's video is going to be a continuation of the Rise and Fall series. If you haven't seen any of the other videos I've done for this series, check out the playlist on my channel. But basically, it's a series analyzing the rise of a given contender, their peak, and then how they started to fall off. So today I'll be looking at the Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen Chicago Bulls. And although Jordan and Pippen technically were together on the Bulls from 87 to 98, I feel to tell the story I want to tell today, I'm going to be looking at them from the Bulls from 88 to 99. So, starting off real quick, a few details. Bottom left are regular season player individual stats. Bottom right are player individual playoff stats. And then top left is the record, the seed, the playoff result, and the offense and defensive rating. So I think really the first year that Chicago was a contender was this 88 to 89 with Jordan and Pippen. This was the last year that Doug Collins coached the team. They were the sixth seed. They only won 47 games, but they did make the Eastern Conference Finals. You'll see from the statistics that Jordan had a pretty dominant season, averaging about 33, 8 and 8 in the regular season. Good supporting performances from Pippen and Grant and Bill Cartwright. And in the playoffs, they basically had the same exact production from everybody. Um, Jordan put up, 35, 7, and 8, which is really good. Pippen put up about the same stats. Same with Cartwright and Horace Grant. Um, the only reason that this team lost was that they just went up against a really stacked Detroit team, and Chicago didn't have as much talent as that team. Detroit had Isaiah Thomas, Joe Dumars, Bill Laimbeer, um, Mark Aguirre and Dennis Rodman, and that was just more firepower than basically Jordan and what were at the time role players. Like Pippen wasn't like an all-star caliber guy at this point. But they were all around a solid team and had a pretty promising future considering the youth of Jordan, Grant, and Pippen. Next year was the first year that they brought in Phil Jackson, and their team jumped up quite a bit, improved by 8 wins, went from the 6th to 3rd seed, again faced off against Detroit in the Eastern Conference Finals and lost, this time in 7 games instead of 6. Their defense slipped a bit, but their offense improved a bit as well. Pippen was an all-star for the first time, I believe. Jordan, again, had really good averages of 34, 7, and 6 during the regular season. Horace Grant and Bill Cartwright and John Paxson provided good supporting roles as well. And come the playoffs, this team performed again really well. Jordan averaging 37, 7, and 7, and Pippen averaging 19 and 7 and 6. I think as some people know, maybe some don't, but basically Scottie Pippen got super sick for Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals and really wasn't able to play much at all. And that's why a lot of people contribute them losing that series to Detroit. It's hard to say definitively, but that was definitely a factor. But really, this was the first year that Chicago had arrived and was like ready to contend and be a force in the NBA, I would say. The next year, they continued to improve. Again, improved by 6 wins, hopped up to the first seed. They did win a title this year. They led the NBA with the best offense, and their defense was really solid as well. Again, you had all stars in Jordan and Pippen. Pippen's best year to date. Jordan was MVP this season. Again, solid supporting pieces in Bill Cartwright, John Paxson, B.J. Armstrong. Horace Grant providing really solid performance as well. In the playoffs, everybody played pretty much the same, and Pippen stepped it up, going from averaging 18 and 7 and 6 to 22 and 9 and 6. So his performance improved quite a bit. Um, and yeah, at this point, they really basically had the best player in the league in Jordan and another perennial all-star in Pippen, along with a bunch of role players who just really knew how to fit in and do what they had to do to help the team succeed. So they ended up being Showtime in 5 games in the finals, and this was Showtime without Kareem. Going into the next season, they improved upon themselves. They hopped up again by 6 wins. So you'll notice this increase of 47 to 55 to 61, now to 67 wins. Again, we're the first seed. Again, we're the top offense in the league. Went from the fifth defense to the fourth, so they improved defensively, and they won the title in 6 games versus Portland. And basically, this was almost the same exact team, and they just ran it back and did the same exact thing again. They just had better chemistry than the year before. Jordan and Pippen both were all stars again. Horace Grant, really solid starter, and then you got the good supporting pieces of Armstrong, Cartwright, and Paxson. And same thing in the playoffs. They all basically just did their role. Jordan played great, averaging basically 35, 6, and 6, and Pippen averaged about 29 and 7, so really good numbers from him. And again, they were basically just more talented than the Trailblazers were. Jordan was better than Clyde. Pippen as a second option was better than Terry Porter, and with the best player in the league and another perennial all-star, as I said, you're going to find a lot of success. The next year is the first year that they did not improve in wins over this first 4 years that I've covered. They went back down to 57 wins. They were the second seed to New York, who was the 1 seed. They had a bit more trouble this year. I believe they went to 7 games with New York in the Eastern Conference Finals. They beat Phoenix 4-2 in the finals, but it was a bit of a fight. I'd say probably out of these first 3 finals teams that Chicago faced, this Phoenix team was the best one, having won 62 games this year. I believe Phoenix also had the first ranked offense, so Chicago was second, but still overall really solid. You'll see another great season from Jordan. Horace Grant and B.J. Armstrong had really solid supporting seasons as well. Pippen basically had a repeat season. Cartwright and Paxson still pretty solid supporting pieces. Come the playoffs, Jordan played great, averaging 35 and 7 and 6. And again, really solid performances all around from everybody. And basically, how did they win the finals over Phoenix? Well, basically, it came down to Jordan was the best player on the court, and I believe he averaged something like 43 points per game in the finals. So he just really took over that finals and was not going to let Phoenix win. No way, no how. Next, we have the season in which Michael Jordan retired to play baseball. So Chicago was still good, winning 55 games. They got to the second round and they lost in 7 games to New York, and it was a really close 7th game, and they just very narrowly lost to them, but they were very close to going back to the Eastern Conference Finals at least. Defense was still really good. Offense took a bit of a hit without Jordan. This year you had all-stars on the team, and Pippen, Horace Grant as well was an all-star, and B.J. Armstrong. Bill Cartwright was still there as a supporting piece, but they had brought in new supporting pieces like Tony Kukoc and Steve Kerr, who were contributing pretty well. But Armstrong and Horace Grant saw their offensive games increase a lot with Jordan gone, so that's what contributed to them being all-stars. You probably have Pippen's best individual season, averaging 22 and 9 and 6 with 3 steals per game. In the playoffs, they all played pretty well, but they did really just sorely lack, you could just tell that Jordan was missed having him there. And although this was still a good team, they weren't quite like the title contender that they were with Jordan. But, still had a great coach, still had a really good team. The next year, Jordan comes back towards the end of the year, plays 17 games with the team down the stretch. But for most of the year, they were without him. And the difference of this year was that they had lost Horace Grant to free agency. And really to replace him, they had brought in Ron Harper, who, at this point had gone through some injuries and wasn't exactly himself. Ron Harper was normally like a 20 points per game scorer, but they just really brought him in to be a defender on this team. The defense was great, second in the league, and the offense was better than the year before, 10th. Tony Kukoc really started to improve, averaging 16 points per game. BJ Armstrong averaged 14, still really solid. Jordan came back and actually still played pretty well, averaging 27 and 7. His efficiency was quite down though, only shooting 41% from the field. But overall, I mean, still a good team, but having Horace Grant really hurt them. And in the playoffs, I really don't know what to say because Jordan actually played really well. He shot 48% from the field and scored about 32 points per game. Um, if you have to attribute why did they lose to Orlando in that second round, I feel like it was just because Jordan, although playing well, still wasn't quite himself. Where he was basically playing at like an all-star level this year, but he wasn't playing at like that all NBA first team MVP kind of level, but he was just like an all-star this year, and he kind of needed the offseason to work himself back into form. Um, Beyond that, in the playoffs, everybody else played fine, but Orlando was just really the team to beat this year, and Chicago just wasn't in shape enough, I guess you'd say, to beat them. 95 to 96, probably the best individual season for this team for sure, and possibly ever for any team. They were one of the few teams to ever be number one in both offense and defensive rating. Obviously, set the event at that time record 72 wins in a season, and they won in the finals against Seattle 4-2. Michael Jordan was MVP. Scottie had a really solid season. They still had Kukoc, Ron Harper, and Steve Kerr as supporting pieces. But the big difference on this team was that they basically had lost BJ Armstrong to the expansion draft, and they had traded for Dennis Rodman, who came in and played pretty well for them, getting 15 rebounds a night. In the playoffs, they all kind of maintained their similar level of play, and when you have the MVP along with All NBA first team and Scottie Pippen, and like a NBA's leading rebounder, Rodman, you're gonna have a lot of fortune go your way. And the supporting pieces like Kukoc, Ron Harper, Steve Kerr all played really well. Additionally, so this team, although the finals was 4-2, they were pretty dominant. Next year, they won 69 games, again with the top offense in the league and the fourth defense. Jordan had another great season, averaging 30 points. Pippen and Rodman kept up their similar statistical levels. Kukoc was again good, along with Harper and Kerr. Basically, they repeated the same exact season. They just were a little bit more tired, so they didn't win 72 games. They only won 69. In the playoffs, everybody kept up their similar production, except Rodman actually struggled a lot more than the rest. He went from averaging 16 rebounds in the regular season down to 8 in the playoffs, which is really down for him. And Tony Kukoc struggled quite a bit too, only shooting 36% from the field. But overall, this team still was good enough defensively to get it done, even though there were some offensive struggles from the likes of Kukoc, and I would also say Rodman shot pretty poor, only 37% from the field. The last championship year of this team, 98, they still won 62 games, still had a pretty solid offense and a really good defense. Again, beat Utah 4-2 in the finals. Jordan, in his last MVP year, good numbers, but not the best he's ever had, averaging 29, 6, and 4. Pippen still having a really good season. Rodman having a really good season still. And then good supporting performances from Kukoc, Harper, Kerr, Longley. And then the playoffs, they basically all, played to the same level they're capable of and were able to beat Utah because they just had a lot more. I'd say they had a lot more depth than Utah did. Plus, they had the best player in the series in Jordan. So after this season, Phil Jackson was not under contract anymore, and he left the team. Jordan retired because he was only going to play if Jackson was there. Dennis Rodman was a free agent and left. Steve Kerr was a free agent and left. And Scottie Pippen got traded to Houston. So this next year, they were left to be led by Tony Kukoc and Ron Harper and Dickie Simpkins and Bill Winnington, who were really the only 4 guys to have carried over from the championship team. and they basically brought in Brent Berry to be the second option on the team. So Tony Kukoc was the number one guy. He averaged 19 points a game. But as you can see in the lockout shortened season, even if you adjust their wins, they were a 21 win team. Because Tony Kukoc was great as like a six man, but as a franchise player, he was not very good. Offense was terrible, having basically nobody who was good outside of Kukoc. Um, their second and third options each shot under 40% from the field, which is awful. And both those guys missed, over half the season, and Kukoc missed about half the season. So, maybe they would have been like a 30-win team if all those guys would have been healthy, but because they all missed a lot of time, they were down to a 21-win team, who I believe they actually were the worst team in the league too. But that's the story of the Chicago Bulls, guys. So their peak was basically 6 championships in 8 years, and their downfall was very abrupt, and it was basically because Phil Jackson had some squabbles and left the team, and Jordan retired, and they just decided to blow it up and start rebuilding. So hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, check out the rest of the series, and that's really all I got, and we will see you next time. Bye.